different factors
Recording
went
in
into
progress.
the why behind this plan. This Northwest Mansfield Vision and Strategy Plan is part of a larger planning effort. I know you're all familiar with the Mansfield Tomorrow effort. This is an initiative to, make sure that there's collaboration, community awareness of what's going on. This plan will be incorporated right into the plan of conservation and development, the 2025 update that Tony is working on. And there's been a variety of other planning work completed recently in the recent years. So again, we're excited to wrap this plan into the plan of conservation and development update that's occurring as well. So the study area, Northwest Mansfield, means a lot to different things to people. We're generally talking about from the town line with Willington south to Route 275. So it encompasses, the Four Corners area of Route 44 and 195. But we took it west of the Yukon campus. And, this area of the community, primarily residential, some institutional facilities, but again, ample open space and natural resources. And when we did our existing conditions and looked at some of we utilized a variety of information, census data. We use the larger census tract that it goes outside of what we identify as Northwest Mansfield, and we also did take a look at this block groups as well when we could get down to that level. But you'll see in greater detail. I won't get into it here, but you'll see in the plan itself there is sources for the information that we provide. Okay, so from our review of the demographics and trends, there were some notable things that really stood out to us. And one, the first thing was that Northwest Mansfield in particular was demographically diverse compared to the overall town of Mansfield and the neighboring towns. There's a large non-family household make up a large portion of the community. We did find, due to the student population in the area, that the median age is 21.6. In that census tract. So that compared to the state's average, which I believe is 41, that is significantly lower. And as Jennifer said, Northwest Mansfield's really missing middle people. There's a large percentage of residents age 65 and older in the area. We also want to just note that, although we didn't include the Yukon campus within the study area, we obviously know that does influence the area greatly. So our community engagement process, we've been at this for quite some time now. We did attend a launch right here in this room, a community open house in the summer of 2023, and I see a lot of familiar faces, so thank you guys for sticking with it. We've done a lot of targeted outreach, going to, the pop-ups, the Mansfield's Celebrate Mansfield Day. We did conduct a public workshop at the elementary school. We conducted focus group meetings, stakeholder interviews, really trying to just listen and take as much in from community input as possible. More on the community engagement, we did have regular meetings with town staff throughout the process. I mentioned the pop-ups, project website. We launched an online survey and got 380 responses. The open house I mentioned, this room was packed. There was about 100 of you here. The public workshop, about 50 participants. I did mention the focus group meetings. We did topic-based focus group meetings, had approximately 60 attendees throughout the 5 of those. And then we did stakeholder interviews, one-on-one or with a handful of people, and that engaged about 28 stakeholders. So we really tried to talk to a diverse group of people, students, realtors, residents, faculty, a wide range. So just getting into the plan organization a little bit, I believe that you've all had a chance to review the plan. It's online, but I'll just run through some of the highlights of it. So the plan is organized around a broad vision statement that's supported by several goals for each of the plan topic chapters. Strategies and actions are provided for each of these goals, and these are the more specific, the steps to really how do you get it done. And then an implementation summary, that's like the action plan, is provided at the end. And to get here, we reviewed all the great work that the town has done, the past plans and studies. We looked at trends and conditions, but we also really took into account, considered community input as a big factor in how this plan was developed. So the vision statement, I won't read everything, but this is it's up here, and again, I encourage you all to take a deep dive into the plan, look at it. Um, but really, overall, this is an aspirational statement. Talking about the things that we've heard that the community values, the natural systems, preserving open space, ensuring livability and vibrancy, making sure this is a place that younger families and older residents and students can all enjoy, and really just making sure that it has a unique culture in the community. And thinking of Northwest Mansfield as a great inviting place, offering a vibrant future for residents. So again, very aspirational, but this is the vision statement that we came up with for the plan that the goals and strategies are kind of built off of. And again, I did mention the existing Mansfield Tomorrow POCD. You'll see that this plan is organized very similar to that. Goals, strategies, and actions will be further refined and incorporated into the 2025 Mansfield Tomorrow POCD. So we did, in going through this process, we noted there were so many things that were relevant whole town, and so we'll pull them in, and we have noted those in the action plan. Chapters include existing conditions information, community feedback, what we heard, different initiatives and case studies. So I think you'll probably learn a lot when you read the document. We tried to make it interesting and engaging with a lot of graphics and supporting text. There's the action plan, much like the POCD, and this is the who, the when, and the required resources. So how do you get it done? And it's very action-oriented plan. This is just some samples of some of the content. We did ensure that we included a lot of visuals, case studies, different examples of successful projects. This was an art center that we highlighted for a potential possible use for the Goodwin School. We did do some renderings of streetscapes, how the street could be evolved, and to improve the infrastructure for all users. So this is a rendering we did. This is North Eagleville Road. We have sections, kind of highlighting different topics, different things that the town is already doing, or other initiatives that we could look at. So a lot of different content to review in addition to tables and charts and text. So now I'm just going to review the plan goals. And again, we're just doing the high level goals. We're not going to get into the strategies and action steps. So for open space and environment, and the bubble that you see there, the comment boxes, those are in the plan. Those are things we heard from the community. We tried to pull in as much of that feedback as possible. But overall, for open space, the open space and environment goal, and these are goals, so very high level, but that Northwest Mansfield natural resources are protected, healthy, and diverse. And again, there's a variety in the plan, a variety of strategies and specific action steps to get to achieve that goal. For community life, the goal is Northwest Mansfield public spaces foster community connection, multi-generational interaction, health, and well-being. For diversifying the economy, the goal is that Northwest Mansfield's vibrant mixed-use hub, Four Corners, balances commercial growth with its rural residential features. And then housing had a couple of goals. The first goal was that Northwest Mansfield is diverse, thoughtfully designed, and meets the needs of all residents across life stages and income levels, while complementing existing neighborhoods and fostering neighborhood cohesion. And then the second goal was that Mansfield and Yukon work collaboratively to improve the neighborhood quality of life. So really trying to think of quality of life here within these goals. For infrastructure, the goal was that Northwest Mansfield's infrastructure supports the community's needs, promotes development, efficiency, resiliency, and sustainability. And then we do have a chapter on future land use. And so the future land use plan, this helps provide a framework for planning and zoning and other decision makers in town. It directs the pattern, distribution, and density of land uses to achieve long-term goals. And this provides a basis for future zoning. So in the POCD, there is a future land use plan that covers the whole town. So we did modify this a little bit for the Northwest Mansfield area. And so when we took a look at the changes, there's a variety of changes that occurred between the 2025 POCD land use plan and this future land use plan. And I'll run through those now. This is side by side. So the one on the left is 2015, and you'll see there's just some subtle changes, and I'll just run through those. We tried to enhance the land use designation, so adding more detailed descriptions. We did add a new neighborhood residential category. There is a new sand and gravel aquifer designation, and this is based on the Connecticut's Geological Survey's superficial aquifer potential map. So this identifies areas, for more protection where there's more higher groundwater yield potential. We did make some adjustments on some of the existing areas and polygons of where they were. So a couple examples on Hunting Lodge Road, we changed south of Carriage House. This was changed from compact residential to compact residential transitional. In the Willington Hill area, we reduced the mixed-use center transitional designation to only include right along 195 and Route 44. So we pulled that in tighter. And then Route 44 west of that mixed-use center was changed to compact residential transitional. And then in the Rolling Hills neighborhood was redesignated as neighborhood residential. So again, some small changes to impact the vision and the goals of the plan. So just to review the categories, and again, I encourage you to take a closer look at the map within the plan as you dig into it. But there are land use categories and designations, and we tried to streamline and simplify the explanations of those. But overall, the flood zone, this is flood prone areas. These should be protected from development. They are already protected. The FEMA mapping is from the 80s, so it might be worth taking a look at that as well. We also, as I mentioned, added that sand and gravel aquifer designation. And this highlights regions with the highest potential for groundwater yields, so that these are connected to water bodies, wetlands. So development there, it needs to be very environmentally conscious if it does occur. There's conservation, recreation, and managed resource areas. And these areas help conserve land for sustainability, wildlife corridors, rural character, and recreation. This includes park spaces, preserves, conservation lands, and the farms and forests. And some of these lands, although we think it's always going to be open space, it might not have permanent protection. And this area also includes Yukon land and agricultural land. There's also residential land use categories in the map. So the first one is rural residential, agricultural, forestry. And this is meant to protect Northwest Mansfield's rural character. Thinking about supporting agriculture. It includes large lots, areas with limited public utilities and open spaces, mainly single-family housing. Duplexes and ADUs are encouraged, and then cluster development is recommended to preserve those natural areas. So trying to keep housing closer together to preserve swaths of open space. There is a rural residential village land use class, and this, applies to the former farm and mill villages, really predominantly residential in nature. And, trying to think about the way the cluster of houses are generally seen in a village environment. And so, uses here include low density residential, agriculture, some religious facilities, municipal uses, and some others. There's also neighborhood residential. This indicates areas for single family, two family, smaller lot sizes, primarily connected to public water and sewer. You're trying to think about walkable neighborhoods here, not overall, not super spread out in these areas. Then we get into the compact residential transitional. So this is where we transition, from some of the higher density residential to some of the lower density residential neighborhoods. So development, lower building densities and designs, structures around 2.5 stories, under 35 feet tall. So some of that, smaller height buildings. Duplexes are encouraged, smaller triplexes suitable as well. Then we have compact residential. This is, allowing for higher density residential development, especially, if the area is served by public water and sewer, and it's near the Yukon campus. Housing can include what's called cottage clusters, townhouses, courtyard buildings, and again, buildings a little bit taller here, no more than 3 stories, so under about 40 feet tall in this area. Then we have a mixed-use center transitional. This is meant for both commercial and multifamily housing. Development should be smaller in scale, to transition into the low-density residential neighborhoods. So kind of trying to step the density and heights here. Townhouses, cottage courts, courtyard buildings, triplexes, and quadplexes are suitable here. And then we have a mixed use center. So that, this is higher density residential uses, commercial office. So this, kind of your mixed use, what you'd see in the area, like Four Corners. And, this is where infrastructure can accommodate this type of use. Again, like I mentioned, proximity to arterial roadways, access to public transportation. This is where you would have the mixed use center. And again, that's the Four Corners area. Then we have lastly the institutional land use category, and that's to delineate existing Yukon campus areas, properties that are intended for Yukon use. Also includes town nonprofits, other state properties, and facilities. And then I should note that this does not include undeveloped portions of, excuse me, Yukon's property that's set aside for agricultural use. So those have been left off of that. So I'll get into our next steps. We, from here until the end of April, we will be taking public comments, and we've done a lot to try and incorporate as much feedback as possible into this plan. So we'll be making minor edits and adjustments from now until the end of April, and then we will be having a public hearing for adoption in May. And again, we'll be accepting public comments through the end of April. So please share your feedback. We do feel that we've done every effort we can to incorporate feedback, and we'll have chances with the POCD process to continue that. But this plan is kind of wrapping up near the end.
I just wanted to make one clarification. Could you go back to the future land use map? So this is kind of plannery and a little wonky. The future land use map is not the same thing as a zoning map, okay? The future land use map is a guide, and it's something that the Planning and Zoning Commission could look at when and if they were to rezone an area. But it is not our zoning map as of today. It's a policy, it's a vision, it's what could be, but it's not necessarily what is today. So right now, the majority of Northwest Mansfield is zoned for 2-acre zoning. And there is water and sewer, especially in the mixed use area. And so since 2006, in the plan of conservation and development, these areas have been designated for a little bit more density. And then we did go ahead and add this neighborhood residential area because we felt that there were certain areas that if there were water, they could have water and sewer, or they could have a community septic, or access to public water and septic. They could have a little bit more density. There is a need throughout the country, throughout Connecticut and this town, for smaller lot, single family residential. So that's what sort of that bright Kelly green is designated. So but I did want to let you know that this does not mean this is our zoning, it's our policy.
Can I ask a question about that map? Quick, Middle Turnpike up here, corner Middle Turnpike in Cedar Swamp. Isn't that the golf course?
So, yes.
And we have it as rural residential agriculture?
Yes.
Okay, so how does that work with?
if there were, I mean, if there were to be a new right now that there is a development proposed, right? So, and it was designated on the previous future land use map as compact residential transitional, I believe then is. And so if something were to change, then it would then be designated as part of our policy as if we were to think about rezoning lower density residential. But that development is still approved. All the developments that have occurred since 2020 are still approved there. Those approvals stay.
But why don't we designate that as appropriate mixed use or whatever it is
We
now?
could put that as compact residential. That
Yeah.
could be.
Yeah, probably a good idea.
Or a compact residential transitional.
All
Yeah.
right, thank you.
Hey, Tony.
Don't forget to use your mic, sorry.
I'm assuming that when we look at this online, that we'll be able to expand these maps so we can clearly see what the roads are and
Yes, yep, you'll be able
Yeah.
to zoom right in and pan in.
good, thank you.
So I thought we'd take questions first from
Can
the
I ask
council.
one other question? I'm curious about this sand and gravel aquifer. By designating that area as a sand and gravel aquifer, and I don't see where it is on the new map.
So if you look, there's blue outlines.
Oh, okay, I was
Lines.
thinking they were rivers or something.
Yeah, yep,
Okay.
that's the,
What restrictions are you saying that people shouldn't be building on these areas because the water table, it could be polluted? Or are you saying this is an area where you could put in a well?
I think we're saying that it's very porous soils, so whatever is done needs to be looked at more carefully. You'll note on that map that there's just a portion of the future land use map that is designated for compact residential, and that's already been developed. And then the majority of the other locations that have that sand and gravel aquifer are in either like the 2-acre rural agriculture forestry designation, already in managed conservation recreation or managed resource area. So, but we did feel it was important to note those just so that when stormwater management is happening, different low impact development practices were happening, it could be considered in a land use application or a zone change. So I thought I'd start with the town council and planning and zoning to see if you have any questions, and then we could open it up to the public and take comments and questions from the public. So does the town, and this can be a little bit informal, and if the council and the planning and zoning commission think of something after there, you can have another chance. But right now, does the town council or PZC have any other questions?
This is maybe unusual in that a couple of times in there, the term charm was used. And I'm honestly curious where you see charm. In where was that observed, or where do you think that happens?
you know, I think part of this is aspirational. You know, I think there's areas definitely that have, you know, just the silos and the rural landscape has the charm.
But that's, I mean, as I scan it in my head, I don't see any silos. I don't see any villages. I don't see any, and that was part of the future. Some of it was, you did it twice. You did it in the very beginning, and then you did it as part of the aspiration. So I'm just kind of,
I guess it's how you define charm, number one. But number
Yeah.
two, I would say that the more of the, I mean, this is my opinion, right? But the rural residential agriculture forestry, the areas coming in to the more dense areas, you know, you are looking at agriculture. When you drive down Baxter Road, you do have agricultural fields. You do have neighborhoods. So I think that's an aspiration. We want to keep that. We want to make sure that any future development is well designed so that it could be charming. But it is that's sort of a what a qualitative statement or
Absolutely. That's
yeah,
why I'm curious
exactly.
where
And
you saw it.
I think of, the natural resources and the open space resources, the trails and the loft woodlands, for example, and the shelter falls. I think there's just I think of the open space and parks and as, what I see as the charm.
Kind of the non-developed parts, interestingly.
And that partial to
Yeah.
what I'm into.
That's interesting because in my mind, it's the little villages that have social interaction. That's where I see charm, not in the. So I think it's probably easier to say a place is not charming than it is that it's charming. We have counselors online. Is there anybody online who wishes to ask a question? David or Sam was online for a while. I don't know if he's here. Do you have a question, David?
Well, a couple questions. One, how far in the future are we thinking here? And getting back to the charming part, I keep missing the charm. Maybe because I've known this town since I was 5 years old. I haven't lived here since I was 5, but I've been in and out of this town since I've been 5, and been involved in some of the farming aspects. I'm still questioning the charm in some of this development myself. And again, how many years in the future are you thinking about this?
Sure, I'll answer that. So typically, when the communities do a plan of conservation and development or a comprehensive plan, they look at a 10-year planning horizon and beyond. So I'd say typically a 10-year timeframe is what we would think for this plan to align with the POCD as well. And then, when I mentioned, that you mentioned the charm again. I think, this is very aspirational. We have a vision statement, the chapters. There's a community life chapter that lays out a lot of different, specific steps, things like placemaking, adding streetscapes, adding places to sit, adding places where the community can gather. And I think all those items that we add in get to some of that charm. So, trying to help foster that within the community. So if it's maybe not seen as there now, maybe it could get there with some of this guidance.
Can I make one point of clarification, though? There are just 2 instances of charm in the plan, and one is in the vision statement, and then one is in sort of a visionary statement in the chapter about open space and environment. So just 2. We just used charm twice.
I had thought there was
We
one
can choose
earlier.
another word. I don't want to get
Not off.
fixated on that. I do want to hear some, but
Could
well,
we do that? Could we go back
it's
to your
taken.
page 2? I think that was,
This one?
no, maybe keep going, 2 more.
I think it's in the vision statement.
It was the list that had a whole bunch of things, including aging multifamily complexes.
Okay.
There we go. Okay. I think it's interesting I saw this in another document, I believe, or maybe it was probably something related to this. But I think this is an interesting line, the first bullet, that says development pressures and place. And I say it's interesting because you call it a pressure here, and yet it was exactly what was encouraged by the zoning. So I don't know if it's pressure so much as invitation. And I do want us to think about that because it was planned that this would be a more densely developed area. If now we're calling it a pressure, I don't get it.
We can change that wording.
I think it just, that needs to be thought about.
Sure.
Because I think, again, it was very intentional, and this makes it feel like it's, what's going on?
Mr. Coleman.
Would the pressure have anything to do with the increasing enrollment at UConn? Or the number of students that's going to be needing housing? I could see that as pressure.
Those are things that might cause a need for this to be developed or a demand for it to be developed. What I'm taking kind of exception to is kind of calling it a pressure when in fact we invited it by changing the zoning regulations there, by allowing for higher density. And this is what has, that higher density is what surprised people and makes them feel, surprised residents and makes them feel like, oh my God, what's going on here? I didn't know this was going to happen. So I think we need, that's really my point.
Okay.
But yeah, all that, the demand is real.
Yeah, actually, I like that word demand. So I think that is the central characteristic, is that there's tremendous demand for housing in this area, particularly because it is a gateway to UConn. But
And-
I think throughout Mansfield, and that I think feeds into one of the observations in this presentation, which is there's a bimodal distribution of people. You've got really young people and you've got senior citizens. I live in Northwest Mansfield. I am what you call the missing middle, right? The young families. And it's tremendously hard for a young family to move into this area because the price of housing has gone up a lot. I think I've lived here 4 years and my house has doubled in appraised value. And that's because it's not because of development, right? Development brings down the marginal cost of housing. It's because of demand, because there's insufficient homes available for the people that need them. And so I am very supportive of something that's going to help control this cost of housing. I think that's the reason that you see either people who live in houses that they've owned for a long time, or they're renting houses and they're turning over very frequently.
Can I add to that? I think there was also pressure from the major institutional players in this area, the town and the university, because this area was the gateway, the Four Corners is the gateway. And we were all very concerned about the slumminess of the gateway. And the idea was to find some way to make the entrance to this area more productive and more attractive. I think that was part of the pressure. And on the council, we never saw the developers who came and said, we really want to build here, but planning and zoning did.
I think your point is well taken, and we can change this bullet, which is in the plan just in the very beginning, to development demand. And clearly the zoning did welcome this. The large investment in public infrastructure welcome this, and that was very intentional on the town's part. The designation of this as an opportunity zone, but I do think we're studying this because it happened really quickly, and we heard about it, and there's also some other things happening. So this section right here just talks about why we're studying this area.
I just had a comment about again, the development pressures. Maybe we're also trying to protect the pockets of rural land, protecting it from the demand or the pressures. That aspect as well. That's why one of the reasons why we're studying, right? To sort of like smart growth, pockets of development and pockets of conservation and rural areas. And I see 2 hands up there.
I would suggest you call on Carlita first because David has spoken, and
Can't see the screen.
Oh.
Yes,
Call
so,
Okay, all right, Carlita, you have a question?
not so much a question as just a point of clarification. Um, just for consistency of terminology from my planning and zoning days as well as going forward, I thought, and you all correct me if I'm wrong, that we had moved away from even the use of the word rural character. It had been removed from planning and zoning documents as well as other town documents. And so just for consistency's sake, that would be something to consider in our terminology as we discuss what this vision is.
That's a very well taken point. It's challenging to talk about rural and maybe low density. And so we're always sort of trying to figure that out, but rural character can be sort of a charged,
Maybe just call it charm.
thanks.
Yeah, and 3 times is a charm.
Yeah, and David Latrico has his hand up again.
Okay, where, I'm looking for my,
You just muted yourself, David.
internet, can just barely see it. Okay, can I be heard now? Okay.
Yes.
Pressure and demand. I'm of an age where I've seen too many things. That's my problem. I visited Ann Arbor, I think it was 1969, 1970. And I was visiting a family and I had some friends who were going to Michigan. And I remember the rural characteristics of Ann Arbor, a lot of farmland that I saw. The last time I was there was a little more than 20 years ago. Real big difference. University of Michigan had about 20,000 students, 1969, 70. And anyone may correct me if they think I'm wrong. I know the population is closer to 40,000 there. Again, I'm not exact, but it's double, must be. So I'm concerned about Mansfield going the same way too fast. Demand, pressure, charm. I think there has to be a lot of thought about that. I mean, I most likely won't be around to see all this charm come into being if you're talking 10 or 15 years. But I'm concerned about other people who live here, my children, my grandchildren. And I would like to see some real thought into demand and pressure as applied to our now beautiful town. That's just a comment I wanted to make.
Mr. Coleman.
Thank you. With all this new housing and student population increasing in the Northwest neighborhood section, I'm concerned about demand, more like water demand, the need for water, and the actual water resources that are in the Northwest section of town, and how they really need to be protected. And I think we're losing sight of that. I think the standard on the corners is on a wetland, I have to admit it, as impacting possible future drinking water. Has there been any drinking water study? I know you mentioned aquifers and you marked them out on the map, but has there been any drinking water study? I know has been some studies around town, but has anything been done up in that area?
In terms of this area, the majority of the dense development is on Connecticut water, public water. So
Correct, but I'm talking about the water source under the ground there.
you mean the groundwater?
Right.
So
If Mansfield ever needs future water needs, I think we want to protect those.
correct.
Yeah.
That's something we could put in this plan. We have not done those studies.
It would be a good idea if I could make that suggestion.
Not that I know of. That yeah. We have Lon here. Maybe he knows.
And I believe we did include that.
So I'm I'm going to ask that folks, if folks have comments, we really want to hear them. And so we are going to need to have you use the microphone so that folks online can also hear them. But if you could, if folks, are we ready to take questions from the audience? All right. So if you can raise your hand and we will get you the mic. And okay. So we can take a question from, so we've got Paul Stern.
And Mr. Mendoza.
Mr. Mendoza, and then John Armstrong. And then we can go to the audience who's here in person. So why don't we start with Paul Stern?
You're muted, Paul.
You can hear me now, right?
Yeah.
I'll try to remain charming too.
Stern?
I'm curious about how infrastructure and future infrastructure is going to interact with and intersect with this vision. Do we have a vision for the places where we think infrastructure should be expanded? I mean, one of the critical elements to small lot residential, which is the kind of stuff we need for the middle-aged, young families, the construction of that is very dependent on having, water and sewer so that you could keep the size of the properties small and economical. Does this plan envision or spell out where our infrastructure might someday go? Because that's sort of going to drive where these specific kind of housing goes.
We do look at where our Four Corners water sewer service area is, and we also look at sort of the water pipeline overlay zone. So, but that is one of the goals. Is this is going to have water and sewer are going to have to be studied. Oops, someone is not.
And I might add that demand being such a Yukon-driven phenomenon right now is going to require that the town coordinate or cooperate or collaborate more closely with Yukon in working out, meeting out these things. Yukon has the water and sewer for this part of the town anyway. So I just want to point that out.
That's actually owned by the town.
Oh, it is.
The water and sewer in this part of the town are primarily owned by the town. There are a couple of minor stretches that are owned by the university, but it's all town owned.
Where is the sewage processed?
No, the sewage is processed at the Yukon plant. The town owns the infrastructure, and that is what we bonded for. But all of the sewage gets treated at the Yukon treatment plant. So,
and it has a capacity for our future endeavors, whatever they are.
We're going to have to renegotiate that if.
That's okay. So I guess I'm still going to stand by what I said. We're going to need the university's cooperation and collaboration to make this seamless.
Correct. That is. Okay. Can I move on to John Armstrong?
I'm done. Yeah.
Oh, you're done. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Jennifer. John Armstrong, Associate Dean of Students at UConn. I just have two comments and then one question. Two comments are, there's been a lot of discussion tonight about growth and enrollment at UConn. I want to clarify that growth and enrollment will need to first, we'll look at growing infrastructure within the university and what's available both within the university and beyond. In addition to that, the growth and enrollment will include all four of our regional campuses. So when there is a discussion of growing enrollment, it is not strictly at the Storrs campus, it's at all of our campuses. That's just a point I want to make clarification. Additionally, the question I have is under this slide that we're looking at now, and in one of my roles that I work with is I work with a number of external property managers. I have great relationships with them and collaborations. Aging multifamily complexes, could you please explain what is the future plan of those complexes? If that is a bullet point on here, is it the plan to remove them because they are needed at this point? But when we talk about the demand for some of the multifamily complexes that were developed by the town of Mansfield, the demand was not there at the time when this plan was pushed through. The plan was developed in 2015 when our on-campus housing numbers were around 12,000. And when the plan in 2015 was developed for the plan of conservation and development, the discussion at that time was to build more apartment complexes to pull students out of the neighborhoods. That was one of the priorities. Mm-hmm. And so I just want to make a clarifying point about that growth in the multifamily complexes that were built and developed. At that time, there was not a need to grow more or develop more apartment complexes. And it's an unknown at this point if there is a need for more multifamily complexes. So just a point of clarification and a question on the aging multifamily complexes that currently exist. Thank you.
I'll just answer that as we will acknowledge all of these, but to answer the comment about the aging multifamily complexes, I think Northwest Mansfield is unique in that there are a number of multifamily complexes that were built in the 60s, 70s, 80s. So that's unique to the majority of Mansfield. There's a concentration of them. So we've got these older multifamily complexes and then newer ones. These are on private property. They're not town projects. And we certainly value these. We know that students and families are living there, and that's fine. But the fact is that we have our housing stock is composed of these facilities that were built, many years ago. So, but no, we wouldn't have control over, removing them because it'd be outside of that's something we could do as a town. Mr. Mendoza, I think is.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my house is in Mansfield, in that little pocket in Meadowwood Road, north or like one block from North Eagleville Road. And something I want to echo a little bit of the concerns, and the two of them would be the connection to sewage and access to water. And I'm not sure if all my neighbors have the same need, but I think most of those houses are from the 1950s, 1960s. And one, I would say perhaps deterrent for some families to move back is some of the costs that were going to come associated to those houses. So my concern is that the town, it seems like the town is prioritizing developers in terms of access to those resources as an option, because I don't think currently that the street that my house is in has access to sewage and town water, and we have that periodical monitoring due to the spillage from a former. I don't recall exactly the situation, but we had the constant monitoring in terms of contamination levels in the water. So that is a concern for the house in terms of the future and returning to Mansfield and making Mansfield home, right? So my concern would be, or my request is that when you do these studies, you contemplate what is going to be the expansion of the sewage and water network and give equal opportunity to residents to tap into those resources. Thank you. Oh, by the way, I'm a political science professor at Eastern Connecticut, so.
Thank you. All right, have we heard from folks online that need to, do you see any hands? It's hard.
I can't seem to get a hand up here.
I don't see any other hands.
Jude, did you have a
You know,
comment?
I do, and I have my
Oh.
audio and video on, but I can't seem to find a hand. I have participants in a chat and so forth.
Okay,
So if you don't mind my speaking, I don't know, apparently no one can see me and it doesn't really
No,
matter.
we can see you and hear you. At least
you
those of
can?
us who are sitting around the circle can see you and hear you.
Okay.
And
well,
so can the
most
audience.
unfortunate, I would have tried to look better. My first concern, and I've expressed this in numerous occasions, is that my understanding is the next largest population, other than students, is over 65 in this town. So the taxpayers are primarily, or at least, maybe I'm incorrect, but these are the citizens that have been paying taxes all of their lives that have lived here. We are constantly put at a low priority or no priority. I hear tons about recreation, very valuable education. All of these things are valuable, but I do not ever see a sense of urgency related to housing seniors or caring for seniors. And I know your plan of those town rural concepts of villages, et cetera, are excellent, but you have people right now, right here, who are too sick to attend your meetings, too sick to do your post-ups, pop-ups, et cetera, who are in as much of a critical need of housing as your young families and your students. And I feel we're greatly underrepresented. I also assume this means that the Goodwin School is not being considered for a senior center. So I assume that that's being handled within another property like the community center. And I also think there's a tremendous opportunity for UConn to partner with us like the Farmington Group does with gerontology services, with nursing, with all kinds of graduates assisting elderlies. I think these are sorely lacking in plans.
thank you for that feedback. Okay, I'm
Sorry.
sorry, yeah.
I know, I just want to comment on, it seemed like there's a normative statement about like the charm of Northwest Mansfield. It felt like there's some derogatory of like, is it charming? And I just want to offer a light defense in that I live in Northwest Mansfield. I appreciate it a lot. I really enjoy taking my son for bike rides on but there are not very many sidewalks in Mansfield. I think a solid proportion of them are in this tract area, which I think should be defended, and expanded. I think that like Mansfield Supply, I would argue, is the most charming area of Mansfield. I dramatically enjoy that small business. I think the adventure park in the area, I think the stretch of road between Four Corners on 44 that goes out to, I'm sorry, into, there's a giant oak tree as you go out to Thompson and Sons.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, if you
charming,
go
yeah.
west on 44.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it felt like there was a statement that there's not charm worth protecting or worth recognizing or expanding here, and I would protest that.
I would add to that anybody who's ever been in Jersey City, New Jersey, or Newark, New Jersey, or anywhere in the armpit of New Jersey would find that the environment of Mansfield, Connecticut to be the most charming place they've ever been in their life.
thank you. Okay.
Some New Jersey people might take offense to that.
Yeah.
I've got rights in that department.
I would really like to hear from folks in the audience. If you have, I know a lot of you have been involved and you've come to the public information sessions and we've interviewed you and hopefully you completed the survey. But so if you have comments, now is the time to make them, but also you can make them in writing at another time. So I saw Nancy's hand first. So Nancy, let me just plug you into the microphone. Well, people online can't hear you if you don't speak in the mic. Sorry about that.
When you're doing the strategies and the actions, you had colors, and it was great because I said, okay, fine, it's going to be done in 5 years, 10 years. But down below, the colors corresponded to what we did for the POCD. I mean, this is supposed to have been done in 2015 to 2020, 2020, 2025. I don't know, you know, on the, so it was really, I was like, are we just copying and pasting from POCD?
Oh.
It made me a little worried about that. And I was also very disappointed that Goodwin didn't come up. It sounds like you're going to do more studies about Goodwin School. And I was really disappointed to see that.
Thank you. Yeah, we did. We noted a couple, we strongly heard from the community that, continued community use at the school was desired. So I think that's, something that's going to be pushed forward is a community facility in some capacity at that location.
And it won't be knocked down.
So so Ryan Aylesworth, town manager, I don't think anybody is prepared to say tonight that the building will not be knocked down. I don't think there's a plan in place for that, but I think that it's Goodwin and Vinton both, now that we have a consolidated elementary school, the future of those properties, both in terms of the highest and best use for the town if they remain municipal properties or if they were to be considered to be candidates for adaptive reuse by a private interest. All those decisions are future decisions that haven't been made, but would definitely not go on the record as saying that a decision was made to not take the school down, because the building, Goodwin in particular, certainly has a lot of structural issues, and that's why it was not a candidate for renovation to keep it as a school.
Has that school been completely mothballed?
As I understand it, as a facilities person would say, I guess mothballing is on a spectrum. I mean, it's Goodwin is more quote unquote mothballed than Vinton because it doesn't have, daily occupancy the way we've, leased space to Region 19 for Vinton. So it's, I guess, to use a colloquialism, largely mothballed.
So mothball would mean it's winterized, you don't have to run heat and electricity.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a low level of heating so that, pipes don't freeze and that sort of thing.
What does community use mean? What does community use mean for a Goodwin school?
That just means that it remains, open. It's not private. So the community can still continue to go there. We heard that, even now with the school not being closed, folks are using it, that there was using it, sports fields, going there, having picnics. So it's still, open to the community. If you're a resident, you can still go there and be on that property. And that was important to people that we talked to, that it wasn't just a private development, that it maintained, use by the community. So public.
If I could follow up with another question, you mentioned that we have time until the end of April to give comments, and then in May you're going to propose a plan. Is that a plan? That'll be a fait accompli. We will.
Yeah, the plan. This plan will be complete, and right now we're just. This plan has been. We've done a lot of community engagement. This plan will be incorporated, and additional feedback will be able to be provided as it's incorporated into the plan of conservation and development. But this plan's based on a lot of community engagement. And it's really documenting what we heard from the community. I do want to direct folks, when you're speaking about Goodwin, on page 3.8 of the plan, there were some future use concepts for Goodwin that were outlined. These are very high level concepts, and there has been no decision made yet. But what FHI did was they took all of the feedback that they received from the extensive community engagement, and they just highlighted that. But there is the future of Goodwin has not been determined as of yet, but this plan is providing feedback as to what the community wants it to be.
Okay, one last comment. I personally am disappointed about the community engagement. I have lived in back of Goodwin School for 45 years. I have not seen a single sign at the community center, at the library about this meeting tonight. There was a concerted effort when you had that large meeting that summer to get people out. I did see some signs and posters. I have never been, I have put my name down. I have made comments at one pop-up. but I'm really disappointed about the extent of the community engagement or lack thereof.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to go back. The idea of remove rural, I don't understand. Could you please explain that? Because it sounds, I mean, we have a grotesque exercise at the national level in removing DEI words from all government documents. And is that what we're doing in Mansfield with rural? We're so afraid of it, we have to remove the word from documents?
No, I mean, I would say that it's more the word character, which is a very subjective word. And so I think it's just being conscious of those words.
So that's a yes, we're removing it. Thank you.
No,
Okay,
no,
so
no,
now
no, that's
I know
not a yes.
political
No,
correct.
no.
Secondly,
No,
if the northwest corner is the most diverse portion and Mansfield values diversity, why are you taking all this diverse development and putting it in the most diverse portion of the town rather than other areas? That seems extraordinarily perverse. Third, you have all these developments that have been approved and haven't come online. No one knows what the consequences of those are going to be. There's planning, and planning is fine, but knowing the consequences of those, particularly in terms of things like traffic, is unknown. Why then seek to put more when you don't know the consequences and results of what you already have? I looked at the list of developments planned for the northwest corner on page, bear with me a second, thank you. I don't have it here. I'm sorry, I don't want to waste your time, but I would like to know, where's the list, the comparable list for the rest of Mansfield, for the northeast, southeast, southwest, where's the list of those? And then the last thing is economic planning. Seriously, Mansfield is now doing economic planning at the level of census tracts. National governments struggle with this. Whatever gives people the belief that the town of Mansfield, with its relatively scarce resources, has the capabilities to manage economic development at the census tract level? Thank you.
Hi, Jeanette Picard, 72 Timber Drive in the Northwest neighborhood.
So I'm not sure. First of all, removing rural is not. Sorry, my mic was off. Removing rural is not something we're going to be doing. I said we were going to be removing the word character, or just looking at how that's phrased. It's just something that, because character is subjective, rural isn't, but we need to just kind of think about that. I guess the looking at where the list of developments are, those have been approved. Those were approved, and so that is one of the reasons why we studied this area, because we knew that there had been a lot of developments that had been approved here, and we wanted to, and we also had a moratorium for a year on high density housing. So that's one thing. And then in terms of looking at economic development on the census tract, that was how we had to look at the population of this area, the characteristics of people who live in Northwest Mansfield, which is a little bit different than the rest of the town. So those are some of the answers that I have.
Hi. I'm going to go back to the word charm. There is a lot of charm in the Northwest neighborhood. The discussion that has happened today at the beautiful horseshoe table has focused on that area of the Northwest neighborhood that is the commercial developed area of Four Corners. But if you step out that 1 mile strip, there is charm. There are the original houses of the first development of Four Corners. Those houses are all still there. If you go past the development, there are a number of very beautiful houses. There is charm, and I feel that some of the comments that were made really denigrate our neighborhood and make it difficult, and it is a neighborhood, make it difficult to look at this objectively with what it really has to offer. When I've spoken before, I've spoken about the fact that most of the housing is residential. And there are neighborhoods, one of which is ours, but there are a number of neighborhoods. There are natural resources. There are a number of parks. There's the Cedar Swamp Aquifer. There are the few paths that we have. It's a wonderful place to live. And I feel that some of the comments made tonight really denigrated that. This is our home. This is the place that we chose to raise our children, to bring them to school, for some people to retire, actually me now, some people to retire. And it's not a roll of the dice. There are people who live in the northwest corner. And some of the comments seem to forget that. Even as you go up Route 195, you have one of the 2 Fitch houses in our town. You have charm. Unfortunately, in the commercial area, and now with the standard, that's overshadowed. But there are a lot of really wonderful resources and natural resources that we need to protect. And so I want to go back to the word charm, because it is there, and it is a home for many, many of our residents. And I would hope the people sitting at the horseshoe table have not actually forgotten that. Thank you.
Am I next? Okay. Hi, I'm Ted Buskey. I'm 72 Timber Drive. I'd like to mention an observation. Earlier there was some discussion about the sort of surprise about the development in the Four Corners area. My observation is that when we put in the water and sewer, we set the foundation for a project of the magnitude, probably larger than the magnitude of the town center. The thing that we didn't have, the town with Four Corners that this town center had, is we invited developers in, a developer in, to organize the whole thing, look at all the details. I don't believe that we had that. I don't see any evidence that we had that kind of effort where we looked at the access, the lighting. And I'm mentioning these things because they all came up with respect to the various individual developments. We didn't address all of those things like, for example, the traffic. We just did as a whole Four Corners area that went all the way from the golf course up, almost up to Ashford, no, to Willington line, and then down 195. So that's my concern, my encouragement for the Northwest plan is that we look at that, make sure that we look at that level of detail. It's very easy to talk about the charm and the definition and so on, but you know, what exactly are we looking at in terms of water and sewer and lighting and what kind of development? I don't think that we had a detailed enough plan. I've mentioned this before in the POCD of 2015 that could guide us to the level of detail of defining how we were going to select or how we were going to regulate the standard because that's what's there, and make it a little bit more. I think the takeaway is that we wanted to make it a little bit more of a fit in to the town rather than this big entryway. The second thing is, and I ask again about the word transition. We as a town rejected a development right across from the Standard a year or so ago, where the developer was taking advantage of the transition, but we had no. We have, to everybody around here, you think transition, oh, that's great, smooth and so on. But the only example I've ever seen of that is a city type of transition where it's very clear to see the rows of buildings going down. But there's nothing that tunes that for our area. That development, theoretically anyway, had a transition between the Standard of 3 or 4 story buildings and what? Was it to our neighborhood on Timber Drive? Was it to the industrial building? Was it to the swamp? Was it to the woodlands? When you talk about transition, I believe that we must define or allow place to define that based on the reality because there's other developments that might go on. It's not stuck in time, but understand where you're coming from and to. With that proposed development, it was only like 800 feet of tens of thousands of feet or all the way around that development that had to do with the Standard and lent itself to the proposed multi-story development. So I'm asking that level of detail be considered and not, and not get it, and so that we don't arrive at the point where we have to decide how that fits in. And Vera just shook her head and said that just doesn't fit there. We need to tell our developers, this is, if you're going to propose a transition, here's the baseline, here's the rules for that. Thank you.
David? I'm brief. I'm going to be brief. My name is Leslie Turner. I live on Timber Drive. One of the issues, and there have been very many wonderful issues brought up tonight that I have not heard addressed is there going to actually be a population that is going to fully occupy all the residential and commercial units that the developers are planning? Thank you.
Thank you. I actually spent most of today going through the document that was sent around. I had 4 pages of comments, but I'm not going to go through all of those. Instead, I'm going to respond to some of the comments that were made here. First, to Zach's comment about the cost of housing going up in Mansfield. If you compare Mansfield to Talon County, to the state, to the region, to the country, we're actually doing a whole lot better. And I did look up the data. So I'm sorry your house went up twofold. Think of it as good news if you want to move. But, it's not just because of Mansfield, just because of the students going out. It has nothing to do with that. Second, with regard to Brian's comment about the water systems, I would very much encourage monitoring wells around the Standard. One of the comments in my written comments is we are currently in a drought situation. It's gotten better just recently, but in the almost 30 years that I've lived in that property, I have never seen the water level in Cedar Swamp as high as it is now. We have water encroaching in the woodlands right behind our house. And I don't know, I'm not a hydrologist. I don't know if there's cause and effect there, but keep in mind, pervious pavement, it still goes through. It gets into the water systems. And we brought this up a whole bunch of times in these apartment discussions. It's not just the pervious pavement because eventually it gets into the water system. So we have to stay on top of that. Back to John's comment about cooperating with UConn. Yes, we need to cooperate and collaborate with UConn. It's obviously a significant factor in the town, but until UConn gets a handle on their acceptance rates and stops flooding the town with more students than they can house, doesn't use the properties that they have to build housing. There's a depot campus out there. You could house a lot of students out there and you can make it as big as you want. One more, back to you, Jen. It sounds very much, and you've heard this rant from me in PZC meetings before, it sounds very much like this is already a done deal. And I wonder if it's even worth sending in the written comments. There are examples in the comments that I'll be sending in there were some comments that I made back in the summer when we had the outline, the slide deck that was distributed. And for example, there were natural resources around the town. And the map was cropped. And I pointed out that it was cropped in such a way it looked like this was a good place to develop because there's not a lot of natural resources here. And I commented, look, here's what the whole town looks like from the same source, from the state. And what happened in the new slide deck, it's cropped even further to make it look like it's even better for development. So I have a feeling that this is more of a sales pitch to the town, like we need to do this, we want to do this. No, listen to what we're saying. We've got to do this the right way. It's like, it's a Jurassic Park effect. We're so dead set on doing development that we're not asking if we should do development. Thank you.
Allison. He did, but I think you had your name. Well, I'm here now, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to address something that came up at a town council meeting this past Monday, and Councilor Kiefner mentioned with regard to the new PhDD regulations that he wanted to see what full build out look like, which any responsible planner does. You make a regulation, you look at what's the maximum build out look like. In no area is more important right now than in the northwest corner. And to my mind, that map ought to be right part of this study. What's maximum build out? What's the maximum build out potential with the new floating zone? What could the northwest corner potentially look like? Secondly, and that same night, Councilman Coleman made a comment about the new POCD and getting community engagement, and he asked for direct mail. Jennifer responded that you were looking at that and that you were going to do for the southwest corner doorknob information. Ironically, when this whole northwest corner plan began, and we had that first summer meeting here in this building, then there was the survey, and there was very low participation initially in the survey. You're talking about, after extending the time on it, a total of 380 people responded. Relative to the population of Mansfield and the population of the northwest corner, I would not be proud of that low participation. So at that time, I asked Jennifer if we could please have a direct mail. I knew in my neighborhood, nobody knew about this northwest plan. I can tell you this past week, I was out walking in my neighborhood, Birch Road, your neighborhood, Beaumont, various areas. I came across 4 people. 3 of them I didn't even know. I walked up and said, do you know about the meeting Wednesday night in the northwest corner? They didn't know what I was talking about. I would gauge that certainly more than 50%, probably 75% of the people in the northwest corner do not know about this plan, this process, and that you have made a gross failure in not sending out a direct mail. Also, Nancy Simon, we were so concerned about this. Jennifer, you said it was too expensive. I don't know what the price tag is on this whole study. I imagine it could certainly have included a direct mail. Nancy went to the post office, looked up how much it was to just send a postcard out announcing it. It was under $3,000. I think it came up $1,200. Surely you could have done that. So let's go back. We had a meeting in the meeting here that summer. Then there was that one meeting at the new school in the evening. We were supposed to have a presentation of the results of the survey presented to us. We were supposed to have a meeting last spring. It's a year later. This is the first meeting. I went to a town council meeting and said, where's our meeting? It didn't occur in the spring. And I said, Jennifer had told me it was going to instead be rolled into the POCD. Town manager Islesworth said, that's false. There'll be another meeting. A few days later, a September 30th meeting was announced. It never occurred. There was no notification. I waited up until the night before. There was nothing saying the meeting was canceled. So, you know, I know you had some pop-ups between now and then, but there's been nothing since. It's more than a year later. You know, how do you call that? I know, again, where's the community involvement? So let's look at things that are missing from existing conditions. There's no mention of the former Yukon landfill, chem pits, and the potential effect that might have on development. We know when you go west of that area, when the Pond Place development came up, that there was a direct involvement in drawing down the monitoring wells around the Yukon landfill. If you want to talk about development in this area, transitional, et cetera, why isn't that in here? You couldn't even blast along Hunting Lodge Road, which runs very close to the actual line of pollution, without potentially reactivating that known in-ground pollution. That's a major failure to leave that out. No mention is made, as I said earlier, of the very important environmental review team study of the vast Cedar Swamp watershed and how many millions of gallons lie in that. It talks about the importance of preserving that. Instead of preserving that, you plop the standard right in part of the watershed. In your northwest corner study, it says, I believe it's Mansfield has ample or robust water stream protection. The falsity testimony to the falseness of that statement is putting the standard right up to the banks of the Cedar Swamp Brook. That's the tributary to a former drinking water reservoir. That's not in your northwest corner study either. Why is the former drinking water reservoir on Bone Mill Road not even mentioned? You know, future water sources, purity of water, availability, volume of water is uncertain. We know there's worldwide water issues. Here we have a former source that if your Schnipsit fails or the Cedar Swamp Brook the Fenton fails, you have to look at little boutique sources. Mansfield doesn't do that. Our appreciation and protection of water resources is terrible. We still don't have robust stream belt zoning in Mansfield. So I'm sorry. I just want to comment on this. It says beautify Four Corners. Again, what has happened to date, to my mind, is not beautification. I don't see the standard, the next thing's coming as beautification. Regarding Four Corners is basically, as you're developing now, an example of unsustainable development. You had to initiate a water diversion, which is environmentally a completely unacceptable action in order to build there. The sewer project failed in every polling place in Mansfield, except for here, where the student population, who always votes yes on any dollar amount, came in. So, you know, pressures, the problem was created. Regarding water allocation, when the Schnipsit water transfer was approved, there was a certain percent of local water was to go to Yukon and a certain percent to the town. And that was based on the belief that the university would house a certain amount of the students and then the town would house another. If that percent varies, if we're now housing more students and Yukon is housing less, shouldn't we have a higher percentage of the gallons per day in that formula? I brought this up before. It's never addressed. As you're planning development in the northwest corner, How is that tied? When you look at it, do you think how many gallons per day is this? What's the traffic? What's the air pollution change? We don't even monitor air pollution in Mansfield. It should be monitored, and you should be looking at changing traffic, bringing in more housing as to how that will affect air quality. The same thing for light pollution. So, and I also, the whole opportunity zone, if it expires, maybe it shouldn't be renewed. So I think I'll end there. I have a lot more comments. Oh, this is from the Yukon landfill remediation project. It's one of their conclusions. And it says, for the former chemical pits, extend the cap from the landfill and attempt to purchase downgradient property to prohibit future development. I'll just sum up by saying, I don't believe that the residents of Northwest Corner really wanted the development that's come there or want more. And I think sometimes we feel like in Mansfield, that area, it's Mansfield's Gaza. You look at it as student-a-lago and a financial opportunity, and forget, for those of us who live there, that it's home. And I'll address charm and say, for me, it's the woods, it's the Cedar Swamp Brook, it's all the various hawks and owls that live in my neighborhood that, you know, catch their rodents in the field behind me, that we hear sing at night and in the morning. That's the charm. So, and I believe that our forests, our fields, our wildlife are going to be destroyed with your plan. And where did all the wildlife that was where the standard go? That's a whole vast wetland area. You know, you're just pushing them all out. So here you go. Thank you very much.
I missed that one.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I'll be very brief. I'm not really going to say what you should or shouldn't do. I just want you to keep in mind in writing the plan that we have a problem in Mansfield with connections using other than vehicles, walking, bicycling, e-bikes, e-scooters, and so on. So whatever comes up with the places that are either being developed or they're developed, or please keep in mind that they need to connect to other places so that people can get there without necessarily having to drive.
Public transportation in the Northwest Corner is mentioned in this report various times, as if it's a wonderful thing. I live across the street from one of the bus stops. It's basically a student service. It's not there for residents at all. There's very little weekend service. When the summer arrives, they stop weekend service completely. And during the summer, the Monday through Friday service drops off a lot. I also want to say something else. It's commented that there's a desire among the staff to build a new town hall, and that tax dollars from some of these projects might help fund that. And I would just say, for a town that has a staff that now works 4 days instead of 5, it's hard to understand why you need more space. And there are other places, and that this would be raised and built up. You look at Goodwin School, you look at Annie Vinton, which have more floor space than this school. And I mean, than this school, I think this was a school. You know, you wonder about reusing those facilities for those purposes. And also, one other feature that's missing from your existing conditions in Northwest Mansfield is the wonderfully unpaved Bone Mill Road, which many of us treasure because it's one of the places that you can go without a lot of traffic. It's a resilient surface to run on, and it's very scenic. I also want to note that the value of the Cedar Swamp Brook relative to one of our still working farms, the 500-acre green farm, is not mentioned. And there didn't seem to be any concern when you put the standard in that you might compromise the quality of that water. Also, missing from the existing conditions or valued aspects is the 150 acres of the property that it surrounds the former reservoir. It's actually owned by the state. It runs between Northwood and Bone Mill and North Eagleville and Silver Falls. But that was the Costello family farm taken over by eminent domain. It was also 50 acres of the Mansfield Fishing Game Club. We've asked for many years to have that joined with the Silver Falls, Shelter Falls Park, and Representative Haddad at one point in time indicated he was interested in pursuing that. It's a geological kettle. It's a very special property, and it's the reservoir there is fished in by many of the raptors in our area. So again, that's something that I notice is missing. You mentioned the HEEP, but that's not even there. So thank you.
If you look at page 2.19, we do talk about advocating for the permanent protection of the North Eagleville track, which abuts Shelter Falls, which is what Ms. Hilding is referring to. That's part of the North, yes, UConn's North Eagleville tract, and it's a recommendation to. Okay, any other comments? Well, thank you very much for coming out tonight. Appreciate it. And we are going to be looking at your comments, and there will be a public hearing to adopt the plan. And again, this really is not a fait accompli, because it's going to be included into the overall plan of conservation and development. So all of the comments that are here tonight, while there may not be major changes to this Northwest plan, it will all go into the POCD. So I thank you. Oops, we have a, yep. Where's the mic? Yep.
The comments of the commentary that is sent through the number 8.
Correct.
Yes.
You repeat how else to provide comments? Is there, what's the process
To email.
We can't hear that.
Oh, sorry. The question was how else to provide comment, that the comment period is going to be through the end of April. Written comments can be, I will be sending an email out, but written comments can be sent to my office. We will welcome them. Then in May, we have not scheduled the exact date, but there will be a public hearing to sort of adopt this plan. But then I do encourage you to stay involved into the overall POCD. This is a strategy for Northwest Mansfield. A lot of the goals and objectives that came out of this are really relevant to the majority of the town. I also encourage you, if you have a specific goal, action, or strategy or goal, strategy, or action that you would like to see, that's really how this plan is going to be implemented. So I would really focus on that section of the plan. And if you feel like there's something that was completely amiss, then just point that out. If we can't include it as part of this, then we can consider it as part of the plan of conservation and development. So did that answer your question? Okay, it's right there. It's kaufmanjs@mansfieldct.org.
And Jennifer, I think we'll get this presentation posted on the website too.
Yeah, Mansfield, all of this will be posted on mansfieldtomorrow.org. It's / Northwest Mansfield plan. I will get that out as an email to folks. I do encourage you to sign up to get notifications, and you can hear more about the 2025 plan of conservation and development. So 2 things. The survey for the overall plan will be live tomorrow. So that's going to be there. And I do have flyers out on that table. I encourage you to take them. I printed off a lot of copies. If you would want to hang them somewhere and encourage more people to learn about this stuff, that would be great. Yes, and on April 5th at 9:30 a.m., There will be a public workshop regarding the plan of conservation and development. We also there will be a mailing that is going to hit next week to every household in Mansfield regarding the public workshop on April 5th and the survey. We are going to be at various locations such as Juniper Hill, the Senior Center, Library Story Hour. We're working with the Sustainability Committee to have them go out. I do have door hangers. If folks want to put information door to door, I would welcome that. We are a staff of 4 and we're a very busy department. So I'm here. If you want to help me get the word out, I would greatly appreciate that. So if you have questions, my email is on the slide, and go to mansfieldtomorrow.org, and that's where a lot of this information is going to be kept. We have Mr. Sear.
Off again, no. Hi, Al Sear. In May, you're having a meeting to accept this plan. Is that correct?
It will be a public hearing, correct?
Is there an avenue to reject the plan?
There is an avenue to reject the plan.
And how does that go?
It's up to the Planning and Zoning Commission and Town Council as to whether or not.
So what does that do at the May meeting?
So what do you mean? I'm not sure I understand your
Well,
question.
you want us to accept it.
No, we would like to hear your comments on the plan. And then we're hoping to incorporate all of your comments. And one of the comments could be, don't accept it. And we will evaluate all comments.
But do residents get a chance to more than comment? Can we actually do something to say, we don't want this plan to move forward?
Yes.
And how does that work?
You send me that email and that will be considered.
Just considered.
Well, it will be considered by the elected body, the Town Council and the Planning and Zoning Commission.
So again, there was another comment. It sounds like it's a done deal already.
I would not say that.
I kind of would.
When was the last time PPC did not have a unanimous vote?
It's sort of an insult that when all these people, I haven't heard anybody speak in favor of this, and you say, come to the next meeting so we can ignore your comments there too. So write them down in this document, but in terms of what we're gonna do.
Well, you can run for planning and
Jen,
town council.
Can I make a comment? Let's talk a little bit political science here. The town of Mansfield is a representative government. You elect members of the town council and the planning and zoning committee, and you delegate to them the authority to make such decisions. Now, what we do is we go out and we, as you can hear, all of these plans, we ask for input. But ultimately, it is the elected officials' responsibility to make the decision. And if you don't like the decisions we make, you unelect us. You put somebody else in our place.
Well,
but that's the system. That is the structure. And the town of Mansfield does not have direct democracy on some of these things. So it's important that we hear from you. Right? Some of this is going to get changed. There's no question that there will be some changes. But tonight we have not heard detailed discussion of where the lines are, what the definitions of the kinds of neighborhoods should be. We have been talking a lot about fringes and about changes to particular neighborhoods. There have been some very substantive suggestions about water, about parks, and some other kinds of things, all of which we will take into consideration, planning and zoning first, and then the council second. But I urge you to read the plan carefully and tell us what you think about the plan. Because we will listen to that.
Well, I don't think you could.
If you could speak in the mic, because folks online can't hear.
Well, my big concern is we're turning our town into a city. And I think the residents in this area all feel that same way. We're turning Mansfield into New Haven.
Well,
And that's not, and you want to talk about rural. I mean, you want to take that out, and I mean.
No, the concern about the term rural character is that it's code
Let's
word
get
for
beyond
white.
that. You're making
No,
the
it's
town.
that's the term rural character is a code word, and we don't want to have that code word because it means a white Anglo-Saxon population.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
But hey, listen to.
Oh, this is.
You're not. The term. I'm sorry. You have to. You're arguing with me, but you're not hearing what I'm saying. The term a rural agricultural landscape has real meaning. But the other term has other kinds of unspoken meanings. So
could I make one?
I really urge you to continue to contact us with what you think is important, and we will take it into consideration. But and I also will say one thing, from the council's perspective, the Planning and Zoning Commission has been very careful to limit the development of high-density housing to 3 sections of town: Eastbrook, Perkins Corner, and Four Corners. And it's been done very deliberately to draw boundaries around development in those areas so that the open space, the woodlands, the agricultural lands, all of that stuff is preserved. So, you know, even if there's something that develops in one spot, it doesn't mean the town is totally changed. It means one spot has been changed.
Sis?
So I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I just want to make one. What I would really like to hear is for folks to go through the action plan at the end of each chapter and provide feedback on that. That's really where this plan, the rubber meets the road. And if there's a goal in there that's missing, that's what we want to hear from. There may be some of the things that we talked about in the existing conditions about the story of Northwest Mansfield. We did our best, but really where this plan is going to get implemented, what's going to happen is in the action plans at the end of each chapter. And I didn't really hear, I really want to hear what people think about those action plans. So, and I know Ms. Hilding has the.
I have a couple of questions. One of them is, how is this all going to be funded? There are no dollars associated with any of this. There's no funding source. I mean, what good is a plan unless you know how you're going to pay for it? Yeah. So you're going to develop more and more in our neighborhoods. So that's why I brought up the issue of the new town hall. It feels like our neighborhood is being used. That's why I said it's student Alago and a financial opportunity. It's not our home. It's not an environmentally important area, even though it has some of the most valuable water resources in the town of Mansfield. And let me just say that the whole concept of Four Corners as a business, as a good place to develop, that came out in the 1950s, early 60s, even before Rachel Carlson's Silent Spring. It's a really stupid place to develop in terms of the environmental aspects of that area. It's misguided in terms of location. It's an outdated development plan that you keep pursuing and in fact worsening with more and more development.
Wanted to speak, so we're going to pass that to him. Good evening, Aaron. I live on Middle Turnpike. First of all, thank you for putting this on tonight and giving us the opportunity to address you all. There were a lot of good points made, a lot of emotions in the room tonight, and I hope the elected officials, the Town Council, Planning and Zoning, actually hear what their constituents are saying, and that, you know, to have somebody say it feels like I shouldn't even write a comment because it's not going to be heard or go anywhere, I think is is a very saddening thing. We have a voice as people in town, and overwhelmingly in the room tonight, it seems like this is something that's not wanted. It's been referred to as New Haven, maybe looking at more of like a Glastonbury, looking at some of the roads and the sidewalks and the bike lanes and things like that. But I would urge everybody in the room watching online, definitely call your council members and talk to them and voice your concern, because this shouldn't be seen like it's a done deal. We do have a voice. Also, somebody made the comment of, don't elect us. You're right. It's an election season for us locally. So maybe this will get people out to vote to change things in the way that they feel the direction the town is going in, because the people they're representing them right now isn't going in that direction. So I just want to again say thank you. Obviously, there's been a lot of work that has gone into this, but it is very disheartening to hear that people right now in this room feel like their voices aren't being heard. And that's a big breakdown, I think, within the town. Thank you.
Last thing, I promise I'll shut up after this. I keep hearing this talk about New Haven, and that's one of the problems that I see with this. There are several comparators in here that just don't make sense. There's a call out to the opportunity zone in Norwich.
Could we get
We are
closed
nothing like
captions again,
Norwich.
if we're going to carry on?
Sorry?
Closed captions.
We are nothing like Norwich. The opportunity zone in Norwich is basically all of downtown, and they have sewer and water and everything is there. And the comparison to suggest that we would be able to pull in the income and the housing that Norwich is able to do by doing this in an urban area is ludicrous. There are a lot of comparisons that were in some of the other documents that we saw earlier, comparing to other university towns. And it's just, we are very, very different. We have dots of development here, there, and everywhere else. We're not going to be able to walk and bike from one to the other. Now, do we want to develop this area? Do we want to pretend that we're going to have people walking from Four Corners down to Price Chopper to get groceries? No, it's not going to happen. So think seriously about the walkability, bikeability issue and how prioritized that's going to be. It doesn't make sense. We are separate neighborhoods, and I don't see it changing. Thank you.
Before we close out tonight, I just want to offer, so as the town manager, I have oversight of all different municipal programs and services, projects, basically anything that our municipal operation, our municipal government does falls under my purview. And I just want to say, I feel blessed every day to have the dedicated town employees that we have doing the work of the town in all our different departments, all our different functional areas, from public works to public safety to community services. We have tremendous people doing tremendous things. I obviously, because I work for the town, I get to see that every day, have direct access to it every day, get to know the people, get to know what their motivations are, what their level of commitment is. And I just want to say before this meeting is over that I don't know if I've ever worked with anybody in my professional life that I felt is more committed to doing good things and doing good work for the community that she represents than Jennifer Kaufman. So people aren't perfect. I'm not perfect. Nobody in this room is perfect. But I just want to say I see it every day. I see the work that she does and her staff does. And the level of commitment, the level of enthusiasm, the level of desire to help Mansfield achieve its goals, not her own agenda. She's as open-minded as they come, and she's as patient as they come, and she's responsive as they come. And I just think that this meeting can't end without at least somebody calling that out, because I see it every day. And I feel very fortunate that Jen's our Director of Planning and Development, and how hard she works, how hard she's worked on this plan, how hard she's going to be working on the POCD. And thank you, Jen, for that.
Ryan, it's hard to add to that, but I appreciate you mentioning it. And what I wanted to say was that I have found it very compelling, as challenging as many of the statements have been, or as in some ways aggressive sometimes. that's why we're here, is to hear them. And if you look over to see Jen, she's writing the stuff down, and FHI is making notes of it. That's why it's here. And these kinds of things, as I understand it, are going to turn up in the plan. And that was the whole idea. So I think the idea, the notion that stuff is going to be ignored and passed by is really not completely true. There'll be certainly some distilling. But again, I think to observe this tonight, from my point of view here, as people have spoken, I've seen the pen moving, I've seen the keys tapped, and I think we're headed in the right way. We're headed in the right direction. We're hearing what people have to say. We're receiving it. And I say we, meaning they, because it further comes to us. But I'm grateful too for the work that Jen and the department has done. And Ryan said beautifully, the energy, the enthusiasm, the earnestness, it's all there. And frankly, it's always there every time I see Jen present or meet with her. It's very sincere. So thank you.
Do you need a motion to adjourn?
Not really a meeting, so
I
we don't
know.
need that. It's a public
Good night, everybody.